Hey, this is Hans from Request for Music, and this is my seventh video on decks. And in this one, I'll try to explain the modulation matrix. Um, Modulation matrix is, of course, modulation. By the way, is the thing that we in the voltage modular world like best because we can do lots of stuff for that. And next to the normal inputs, just the pitch input, the gate input, and the velocity input for the poly source, you have a sustain, bend, and wheel input for which you can use the monophonic sustain, bend, and mod wheel stuff from voltage modular sources and put that into it. And next to it, I've got three monophonic modulation sources. And in this panel, I have my modulation that I can use internally, using also these external modulations. So in this case, I've got my setup to be just my default sound. So I just have this simple, and let's put the volume up a bit. Just a simple sine wave modulator. Carrier. So I have that sound, that's it. And let's take the reverb back a bit. And in this, I have two columns. I have one set to off and I have the other one set to off, because these on the left side are in total 12 sources that I can use and 12 targets on the other side. So in the source side, I have this off thing, of course. I've got LFO 1, 2, and 3 because on the top here I have a 1, 2, and 3 setting for an LFO that I can use, which are separate from all of the operators. And I also have an envelope 1, 2, and 3 in here. So if I have this, I can actually set this envelope to something else than number 2 or number 3. So I have three envelopes that I can also use. So in my in my sources, I've got my LFO 1, 2, 3. I've got operator 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 envelope that I can drive or use as a source. The outputs that I can use, velocity, pitch, random, all kinds of stuff in my sources. And in my targets, I have a whole list of that kind of stuff for all of the operators separately. So I can use my operator 1 level or octave or whatever to use as a target. And apart from that, also stuff like the algorithm, feedback, and reverb that I can change, or LFO1 speed and that kind of stuff, or even all ops that I could drive, or the LFO amount that I could drive. So there's all kinds of things that you can do with modulation. So let's have a look at that. Let's take number 1 LFO as a source. So I'll take this. So that means that if I take this up, it's going from very, very slow up to 40 hertz. So let's take it somewhere around 3 or 4 hertz. And let's just drive the number 1 fine with that. So every combination of a source and a target has this slider underneath, and that slider is the actual drive that you can use. So I could do something like this. So I could do something like this, but for instance, I could also, and let's take the speed up a bit, just a bit more even, a bit more frantic kind of thing. Let's take the now, it would be nice actually to use this and create sort of a Tomita kind of flute or something. So that would mean that I probably want to use um, either a global envelope, or maybe even one of the envelopes from another op that I'm not using, to drive that. So let's actually take my number 6, and I'm going to use my envelope. I'll have to probably use a shift drag to take it back and inside, but let's take my operator 6 envelope. So operator 6 envelope, and I'm going to drive my operator 1 octave. So that means that if I now do this kind of thing, it's actually going up very fast. You don't, or and I'll probably have to use my levels up. But now I want to have my my modulation for the LFO coming in later, right? So I could actually use my LFO, my first global envelope. So that would be taking my envelope 1 and use that to drive my LFO 1 amount. So I've got my LFO 1, which is driving operator 1 fine. I've got my operator 6 envelope, which is this one, this driving operator 1 octave. And now I'm using my envelope 1 to drive the LFO amount. So if I... And maybe I can use my envelope to have it slide back longer, so I could do that. Now this is driving the octave, so if I take this longer, it'll take longer to get back. Let's see. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one because I'm using operator 6 envelope, my bad. So I have to take this one up. So use my shift drag to drag it a bit up. So but since I'm at polyphonic, I'm hearing all of that stuff. So maybe it would be better to go into monophonic and give it a bit more of this, yeah, very nice reverb. Uh, so yeah, you can make very complex kind of modulations. So let's get it back to something standard again. So let's I'm going to actually save this. So save as Tomita whistle or something. It has to be improved, but it's a start. So let's take this one and go back to my default settings again and use my second oscillator. Because I've reset to the default, I'm already back into poly again. So let's take this, and I actually want to do something like this automatically. So take my speed for my LFO 1 again, use my LFO 1 to drive my operator 2 level. So So it's pretty easy to do that kind of stuff, as you can tell. So let's improve it a bit. So I'll take this and I'll take this one down. So maybe turn this up a bit deeper and maybe give it a next operator to use. So I'll take that one and I'll give that some sound to make it deeper as well. Use my envelope again to drive it more. Something like this. Take this up in frequency, and I'm going to drive that with another LFO. So I've taken my second LFO, so I'm using LFO 2, going to drive my operator level 2, take that up. And that could be a different speed altogether, of course. Most of the time I'm exaggerating it first, so I hear what it does and then take this back to a manageable level. That's probably a bit too rough even, and maybe even too high. So let's take that back to just something like this. Thicken it with a bit more of this and maybe the uni, and back to 2 voices and more detuning. So yeah, like that. So I'm going to save that, save it as a preset. So JH poly filter, mod filter, something like that. I'll save this. Actually, it gets into my preset module presets, and if you have my link to my Dropbox, you can actually get all of those presets I already have in here, and every one that I add to that list will be available in that Dropbox list. So you can also have my presets. So anyway, you can use this modulation in quite a nice way to modulate whatever you want, and of course you can also use the mod wheel. So if I take the module, you don't see that, but if I take my mod wheel output from CV sources, I could put that into the wheel input here, into my wheel input, and that's also available. So if I take, for instance, the wheel, where am I? There's my wheel. If I take my wheel input and I use that to drive the LFO amount, yeah, I could actually take that, because that was driving the up level, but I could actually take that instead of using those things in here. So now it's still driving the up 2 level itself, but if I take this up, let's take this out actually. The operator 2 or the LFO 2 is still driving the level of number 3, right? Oh, I was actually going to put that into up 3. My bad. And let's see. That's no good if I don't use my LFO1 to drive my level of my up 2, of course. So I'll have to take that there. Take that. I'll switch off my number 3 to let it hear. So I've got the LFO amount up, and I've got my amount for. So normally it does this. Now if I use my modulation, I could actually use it just to drive. Maybe that's even better. So just take these things off and take that off. Let's just start over again. So I'll just use my wheel as a source, and I'll drive the operator 2 levels straight away with that. So first of all, I'm going to take my my mod wheel all the way up to let me hear how far it's going to get to. So maybe to something like this. And now I'll take this level down. Now I can really drive it by using my mod wheel. So I'm just pressing a chord, and now I'm going to use my mod wheel. So now I was driving the up to level just by using my wheel. So yeah, you can do all that kinds of things with that. Actually, if I'm converting a DX7 file, so if I would just go in here and let's go somewhere in, I have no clue. I'm just going to my Dave Benson kits or the sets that I can find in there. I've got something like Best Bank here. I have no idea what's in there. So just have a look at his. And first of all, actually, let's clean this, because then you see what happens. I'm going to return that. Maybe just go back actually to the default, so we'll be sure that everything's clean. Shift drag on these a bit just to see that it's clear. I've got the Best Bank still selected. I select any kind of sound. I have no idea. I'll just import. No, there's nothing done on this. Let's do some else. Okay, so you see now that when I import stuff, and if it finds any modulations, it is trying to set those to the modulation matrix. So now it's there is some slight modulation in there by using the LFO amount on this, by using the envelope as a modulator for the LFO, and the LFO then is going to drive everything. So it means that if I take this up, it's going to drive all of those operators slightly, so to drive the fine-tuning of that. So let's take it up a notch more, so you really hear it, and the envelope in itself was used to drive that amount. So if you, I'm just exaggerating the sound, but you see that if you do an import, it tries to find all of those modulations, and if it can handle that, it will try to do that in such a way that it takes the modulation sources and the modulation targets and uses the modulation matrix to change everything that way, and so you have it available. DX7 imports, as I've said earlier, will not be a 100% clone of the normal standard sounds, but at least you have some sort of a basic setup, and you can expand on that, change the sound to your liking, and so on. You have quite an arsenal to work with, and it can handle all that stuff. So let's take another one and see. Nothing is handled in this by the modulation. What was it? Actually, it was a some kind of Rhodes kind of thing, analog synth. Just have a look at this, and as I said, you have at least something to work with. Just to look if it Jeff's X. I have no idea what this is. So let's look at this bamboo fit. Oh, flute, bamboo flute. Actually, I would really want to drive the modulation for everything in there. So that would mean that I would do something like the all ops, but I would probably have this higher up um, to make sure that it works. I will not use this, but instead I would want to use the wheel on the LFO of mount. So and take the speed up. And maybe change the height of this one up to 4, and maybe take the height of the second one up to 4. It's pretty low, so because I want some more highs in there. So let's see, all of the envelopes are out of the way. Yeah, but as I said, it takes more work to set it to whatever you like. That was, excuse me, that was not the most important thing here. The most important thing was to look at what the modulation matrix can do, and that you can see, well, that you can use all of these stuff in there, that you have a selection of quite a lot of sources that you can use to drive even more targets in there. So a whole lot that you can do with that, especially in combination with the X7 import. I hope you like that, and I'll be back in a next video where I'll probably have a look at creating some sound from scratch. So I'll see you back in the next one. Cheers for now. Bye bye.